Hey, so technology is always great when it works, correct? Anywho, thank you all for joining us, either whether it's live today as it is now with all the different channels that we have available. Right now, we're currently simulcasting on several different pages and places within Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, several different locations for that, as well as Twitch, which you can find on your game consoles at home, the Xboxes and the PS stations. And also, as always, and will always forever be more, on our TV channel, which is Hospitality Channel, the TV. And you can find that on your Roku, your Google, your Apple TV, and your Amazon Prime, your Fire Sticks, and so forth. So, pretty much anywhere that you can think of finding us. Plus, also, we re-simulcast this on a variety of channels, but we re-simulcast at 11:30 a.m. on City Australia time and 11:30 a.m. Wednesdays on London time for our EU friends. Even though we have, as always, and thank you very much, joining us live from around the world. As always, we are very proud to say that we reach at least 39 countries that we're aware of, and well over 25,000 a week in weekly subscribers, listeners, and followers. And thank you so much for that as well. We appreciate all the attention and interest in what we have to talk about. In today's discussion is breaking down into segments in keeping with our theme that we started at the beginning of September after 8 years of, well, we're in our 8th year of doing this. And the new formatting for us is one topic, 1 hour max. Now, whether we run the full hour or not, but we'll see how well the conversation goes. You're more than welcome to join us live at any time. Ask questions if you would like and or comments from this. And of course, in general, we always welcome and solicit comments and feedback from everyone to make sure that we're hitting topics that everyone's interested in discussing. So today's discussion is creating an effective and good SEO strategy for hospitality business. Um, I made a general statement by saying hospitality businesses because, in fact, even though SEO strategy has a very strong similarity to progress and progression for just about everybody, there is uniquely distinctions as to what you're pursuing within the context of what aspect of hospitality industry that you're working for. And I also realized that since I'm the only one currently hosting the show until we begin to get our other co-hosts in schedule and running a variety of other programs that they want to run with us on the show, that because of that I get to drink my coffee and I have to pause. I don't have to talk all the time. So what do we mean by SEO strategy? Um, our world now, from a marketing perspective, is about discoverability. Not that it has never not been. Marketing is really literally the purpose of discoverability. Its definition as what its context is started in the early 19th century and developed through concept and promotion as to how you made people aware of your business offerings. Um, Thinking back, each place location geographically had some resource about some product, whether it be a lumberyard, a general store. Sometimes it wasn't the diversity of what was being offered, it was the even availability of being offered. So many places did not have a retail component that was a sign of growth, that there was some sort of businesses that had in quantity more than basic necessity to the point that they could trade and share with beyond what they needed to other things that they needed from maybe what you had more of than what they needed. um, that goes up into the world of creating society, basically our aggregation of cities and townships and what have you, and the ability to create and barter trade. And we have all the history lessons. We don't need me to be able to rant and trade about how the mercantile and the middle class were developed from this ability to accommodate the demands of what was needed rather than the polar hierarchy of royalty and peasantry. So, not getting into a history lesson about that and keeping it to the SEO conversation, our world now is about the platforms that people use to discover what it is they want and need for, and us being able to go over and distribute our product or sell our product on those platforms. Today, digital is a big, if not the biggest component of that discussion. So, what do we mean by digital? Well, we all have computers now, phones, iPads, tablets, and so forth, TVs, interactive, VR headsets for the geeks and all of us. And we get online. Now, for all of us old enough to remember, it wasn't always just there's Google and there's Bing. There was Prodigy, there was AOL, there was uh, a lot of variations, and all of them had their ways of trying to demonstrate their access to finding things. I still remember to this day going to a bookstore and seeing the really big, fat books about website addresses because that was the better way of finding out. It was like a yellow pages for, again, something if you're old enough to remember, of where to find online who had what. If they even had a website, so many businesses had no presence online. It was still what they were and had always been up to that point, which was a sign over a building and a location that if you knew it, you knew it. And if you were in the yellow pages, you were discovered because people were looking things up. Back in those days, you'd open up a big book that was given to you because you're paying money for Ma Bell to go over and have a phone that was plugged into the wall. I know I'm being nostalgic. And from that, you would look for plumbers. You would look for things that you were needing, services, products, what have you, hardware stores, and have you. Back then, hotels were about the ability to influence the people that stayed with them so that when they went home, they would tell their friends, and their friends would also want to come and experience what their friends told them about. Word of mouth was the big thing. Because back then, it wasn't about being able to reach them remotely. It was about how what you did was conveyed back to other people so that they would return. That's why we still have interesting cultural developments, segmentation as to where people vacationed. East coast of Florida versus west coast of Florida was distinctly two different regions of the U.S. Economy. And as such, what we did for business and catered to the interest of the people that traveled down here was reflective of that because they wanted more of what they liked when they were traveling and vacationing. So when you were looking about going someplace, and this goes back a ways when I was a child, you would go find out on a map. You'd go to the library and you'd look at a map and you would see and you would look for books that people had written about their adventures and their travels, and they would list places that they had been at and information that they had. Now phone calls were too expensive to make. You just didn't call a hotel because it was a lot of long distance charges that you had to pay for to reach out to them, and a lot of times that wasn't the most efficient means because time zones and so forth, people weren't really hanging around their phones like they do these days. So usually what happened was you would send a snail mail, as what we call it now, but regular mail piece to them, requesting information from them. And I remember how fun it was to go over and get that in the mail as a family, because that was an exciting after dinner experience where all the information was sent in the pack, the brochures, the almost postcard esque kind of stuff that was sent was spilled out onto the table, and you would look through it and you would see all the things that the hotel or the destination was trying to tell you, all the cool stuff that you wanted to do. You know, think about coming to Florida and seeing alligator land and Cypress Gardens and all these other fun things. Like, oh, that's great, that's great. And then you would do something potentially if you paid for this, and that was not always the case of AAA even having this availability. You would get what's called triptychs, and that was a map that said if I wanted to go to this place and I'm from here, I'd go to the AAA location, say that's what I was doing, and then about a week or two later, you would get in the mail or they would have ready for you to pick up your triptychs. And they were basically maps that were made for you, the regular map, but it indicated where you were traveling to and where the gas stations were and where you could stay en route for all this. And so that's how you did your trip. You would reach out if you went to the post office. You would go find the Chamber of Commerce's address to a destination. If you didn't know exactly where you were going to go and you were looking at different locations, you would reach out to the Chamber of Commerce, and they would send these massive packs of really cool stuff of all the stuff that was in their market for you to go over and be interested in doing. And from that, you would make your travel plans. So that's history, and my personal history in that way. Now we have our ability to get in front of anybody at any time, anywhere. And that requires us to be more filtered as to how we present ourselves because we're not the only ones doing that. We're not in some Yellow Pages phone book back in the day where if you added an extra A to the front of your name, A plumbing, you got higher in the list on the general listings compared to having to pay for a bigger ad on the news in the Yellow Pages. And for that matter, that goes back to the days with the hotel book. In order to know if you were a hotel anywhere, you had to pay a lot of money to be in this big book that basically would listed all the hotels that were available in the United States. And it was very expensive to be in, as much as being able to be in the content of that AAA ticks. That if you wanted your hotel to be included in that information, you needed to pay AAA to make sure that you were there, so that that was actually put on somebody's map. So SEO, search engine optimization, for those that are not familiar with the acronym itself, is specifically how do you create and identify the content on your websites so that a search engine, and when we say a search engine, we're really talking about Google, minority towards Bing, and there are others, but those are the big ones. Okay. The biggest being Google. So, how do you put your content, and your content, simply defined, is what you are, who you are, where you are? There are stratas of content that are very, very important. The first strata of content about you is the most critical, easy enough to think, and that is your NAP information: name, address, phone number. Where are you? How can I reach you? And what are you called? Pretty straightforward. That information has to be yours and owned by you. So we'll get back to that component towards Google Maps and Google My Business and so forth, because that's the new quote yellow pages for those old enough, as to the ways that people find you. Well, so put that on a shelf. That's the most important information that you have to get conveyed, is your NAP information: who you are, where you are, how to get in contact with you. Okay. Then it gets into, just like a news article, there's the headline, and there's the strongest supporting argument or point, and then there's subsequently a tiered reduction as to the next most important point, the next important most important point, and so forth and so on. Google over time has formatted how they want you to present your information, so it makes it easier for them to not only discover but prioritize and authenticate all the information you're sharing with them. Why does this come out? Because so many businesses have tried to be more than what they are. They say they're closer to things that they're not. They say that they are things that they're not. They say that they have things that they don't. And so Google, always wanting to be the most accurate assistant to somebody when they're searching for things, okay, by using their platform, okay, as Tim Peter often points out, Google every day, every time we search them, has to um, always be satisfactory in its usage, or somebody will go somewhere else. Google has to live every day with how it's being used. So it has to make sure that the information that it's sharing is the most relevant to what's being searched for. So they always want to make it a priority that whatever they're sharing about you truly is accurate information. So Google's come up with things, and you may have heard these terms like schema. Schema is a relatively new, it's been around for a few years, but it's gotten to be more refined and more important as time has gone on. And that is your ability to identify the key elements like your name, address, and phone number, and your app information, along with a host of other industry specific aspects about you. Every industry and business has a schema about it. If you're an auto dealership, if you're a plumber, there are schemas associated with your industry. And what that means is there are items that you can itemize, you can categorize yourself as, that are specific answers to questions. Think about search engines and how you use them. Search engines are, I open up the platform, google.com, clean screen, little box that you type in. Okay. And all that the system on the other side knows is what you've typed into that window. They don't know why you're interested in it. They don't know if you've typed in what you think is the best question to find out about it. You're not asking the right question all the time. Sometimes you're asking kind of the right question. And so it has to interpret what you typed. Early on in search engines, it was very much about the words, a word. And that's where we get the phrase keyword from. Keyword means this word was used in the search. It used to be very simple in the earlier days of search engines to game the system. And that was, if a word was useful or used to find you: hotel, downtown, best hotel, whatever. That's actually two words, but it grew from there, obviously. But if these key words, okay, then you could, keyword stuff is what it used to be called. You would put a lot of those words on your website to make the search engine in its earliest stages think, because they saw the word a lot of times on your website, that you must be that because you used the word so much. Well, that quickly went away. I mean, there was cheaty ways where you used to put it on white letters on a white background. So even though you didn't see it as a user, the computer, Google searching for it, saw the words in the text in the background and thought that that's because of your usage of the word, then they showed up. They used to also show what was called a keyword usage in your analytics that they gave you, which was very new for them at the time. It used to be Urchin. Then Google bought Urchin, and they offered analytics for free, meaning we'll give you this platform to show you your traffic on your website. It was very rudimentary, and a lot of people were offering that at the time. A lot of your web service providers were offering analytics, meaning these are how many people came to your website. This is how many people did this, so many people did that, but it's very basic. They never kept growing it. They just offered it as general stats. And way back in the day, there used to be a very big fad where you had what was called a hit counter. And that was anytime your website was pulled up for any reason, it would tick the little meter to show you that it was that. So you knew how popular the website was. And it was a measurement of success. Oh, my hit count, I had 2,000 people hit my website yesterday. And it's very funny because that was a ability to visually show users of your website how authentic or real your website was over anybody else, because of all the traffic you were getting means that you were more relevant than anybody else. It was a very rudimentary way of showing relevancy back in the day. So anyway, Google was, of course, always getting better. And through that process of getting better, it started defining more of what it needed, particularly about the content that you were sharing. So it has what's called an algorithm. You've heard this many, many times. An algorithm is a machine learning, computer learning, say, progression of workflow. It comes to simple decisions. If you think of it as a flow chart, point one, black or white. White, okay. What happens when it turns white? Five more choices. After that, five more choices. After that, five for each one. So it turns into this branched tree of discovery. If it's this, then this. If it's not this, then it's this. And it goes through this progression. That's an algorithm. It's a method of interpreting what it finds. And it has, and Google has always maintained secrecy about this so that people, us, anyone, can't begin to game against it. And that's why you see this ardent following of people that interpret how they see changes in the rankings or reportings of people's placements in the search engine as to some way of understanding how best to make sure that they or their clients show up as highly relevant to whatever searches are most valuable to them to drive business. So it's turned into this huge industry of search engine optimization, SEO. So going back to schema is Google and Bing's way. They all Bing really mimics Google in just about everything. Um, as to enhancing the ability to quantify this data. So going back to the search box, you're looking for something, and it goes and it offers your website, and the user clicks on it, and you have phone numbers in the bottom. Now, the computer knows, and it's gotten smarter. But back in the day, they just saw these numbers. They don't know if it's a phone number. They don't know if it's a fax number. They don't know if it's your direct number. They don't know if it's your cell number. Whatever it is, it's a number. And we try to interpret it as best it can based on what's around it, the words, what you identified it for, what have you. Schema improved that by saying, put your phone number here, put your fax here. So in the code that is schema that sits not in visual view of your users, okay, Google say, oh, that's your fax number, that's your direct line number, that's your reservation number, and it would be faster and quicker at being able to know more about your website, which enhanced your authentication and the ability for Google to what's called index you. Indexing is putting you in the list of what this is going to show when somebody looks for these things. Indexing means that you're a hotel, so you're going to get checked for a hotel. You're a hotel in a certain location. That means you're going to be showing up for this result. It means that you have a hotel that has a pool, that has this kind of room, it has this kind of amenity, it has this kind of thing. It indexes you according to what you are identified for, so that when people search for those things, you are in the list of things that Google shows based on how you're compared to the other things that are also indexed for those same bits of information. That's where the competition comes in, because obviously you're not alone in your business. If you are, fortunate for you. If you're not, which most of us aren't, then you have to show up differently for kind of the same stuff that your competitors show up for. So that brings us to hospitality SEO. There is a lot of aspects of our industry that are very much specific to us. A plumber doesn't necessarily talk about a pool, but they do. They repair pools, they fix pools, they install pools. So we don't want to show up when a plumber needs to show up when people are looking about pool repair, even though we have information about a pool because we have one. So we have to be very good about defining what it is about a pool that makes it important for people to discover us. And that is, I'm looking for a hotel that has a pool. Okay. That's different than looking for a plumber that needs to fix a pool. In the world of words, keywords, not really, because pool's still the same word. So what's happened over time is, back when we used to be fixated on keywords, what words people were using, then they start turning into what phrases they were using as to, okay, resort pool, hotel pool, relaxing pool, has a pool, okay, versus repair a pool, pool problems, pool repair, whatever. The words around the words became important. Then Google kept getting smarter. And when I keep saying Google, please know I'm referring to Bing as well. I don't want to take it out of the equation because Bing is a very valuable tool, and we'll get to a little bit of that conversation as well. So we wanted to be better at showing up for what was relevant for what people were looking for. Schema helped with it. I mean, when it first was put in, and it continues to help with it. But really, what has helped with this is that the search engines have gotten smarter. They've learned more and more, not only to look around the words around words, but also the intent of the words. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the terms of all the transitions in what Google has done technology wise. Anything from a penguin to a whatever. They've nicknamed them because of the whatever impact of it is. And as Google has progressed in its usage of platforms like Google My Business and Google Maps and so forth, okay, has changed the influence of how we rank in place. It's created problems. It's created problems for people that were already trying to modify the system by how they showed up, and they were the ones that got affected the worst, which is a lot of reasons why Google implemented these transitions and progressions in their SEO strategies, because they were trying to eliminate the errors that people were able to create by figuring out how the system was looking for information and modifying what information they were giving to artificially, in some circumstances, show up well. That's where sometimes you would see a lot of junk come up in your search results, and or things that were connected to other websites to game the system. Some of the things that are important in search engine optimization, SEO, is what are you connected to? Links. They're called backlinks and reciprocated links, meaning that if you have great content about your hotel, and by being that as a good business, brick and mortar business, and that's a reference to the fact that you're a physical business in a physical location, by the way, that's why they call them brick and mortar compared to virtual or online businesses that don't exist like that, like OTAs. Um, then you might be shared with other businesses in your market, like your Chamber of Commerce, your Convention Visitors Bureau, your CVB, your Tourist Development Council, TDC. Okay, these businesses would share about the fact that you are in their markets that they represent. Those reciprocated links, or you may have been in the news of being the best hotel, or you had a great party there, there was some event there, or you got a new pool put in or something. And because those things would be newsworthy in their news articles and referred back to you with a link that says click here and you go to this website, those links authenticate you in the eyes of Google better than somebody that doesn't have them. So anybody can make a website. You can go now to platforms like GoDaddy and Gator, and I don't recommend any of the other ones because they're bloatedly expensive and their services are diabolically evil as to how they kind of garner you in for extra costs. Not that GoDaddy and Gator don't do that, but they at least do it a little bit more transparently. Um, you can go get it hosted with them even, and make a website about anything. As long as the domain's available and you buy it, you can put a website up and be anything. The idea that you are accurate about what you are is what validates your ability to show up in search engine results. And there's a lot of criteria with this. Lots of things are considered with this, and everybody runs around, and there's way more intelligent, brilliant people that know more detail about the nuances of so many things. But there's certain platforms that are very, very helpful and useful. Moz is a great, useful tool. They quickly grew in their ability to help identify information that best help you identify what you need to do to optimize search engine optimization. You hear that term a lot. Your content, your search engine information, so that you rank well in these search engine pages. And going back to one of our earliest conversations, a computer is relatively not much what it could be if it isn't connected to the internet. A lot of what we do, as a matter of fact, a lot of how we do things is truly based on the fact we connect to the internet to do them. A lot of computers like Google Chromes actually don't really exist well without being connected to the internet. They can do some things while you're not connected, but their real value proposition and functionality exists when they're connected. A lot of what we do, if not connected, doesn't work. Just remember Facebook going out for half a day a few days back. And the quandary that created, the awareness of, my God, I'm connected to the hip on this platform. So the internet connectivity and the ability to discover stuff, if you go to your computer and it's not connected to the internet and you want to know about the local plumber, unless you've downloaded a list of the plumbers in your area, a hard list that's sitting on your computer is going to go, I don't know, because it doesn't know. It can't connect to a data source to answer your question. That data source is Google or Bing. So search engines are literally our modality of finding out what we want to discover. They are a critical key component to how we do business. Now, taking that and its value proposition to them, and knowing that there's influences about the organic aspect of SEO, like linked backlinks and so forth. There's so much more to it than just that. There's H1s, which are headliners, which is anything you see in larger, bold font is called a headline on a website. When you highlight that, meaning that the words you put in that headline, Google thinks that's more important on your website because you highlighted it. Okay. So the largest font is called H1s. The smaller font than that, but still larger, is H2s, H3s, H4s, paragraph. What you put in those headline ones, headline twos, headline threes, headline fours are higher value statements, words, okay, that Google looks at more importantly than the words that are in the paragraphs. They weigh it. They don't just say because you put it there, it must be true. They weigh it compared to what they discover with the rest of the content. So you can't say best hotel in the world and then the rest of it is just not anything about it, because then Google's not going to believe you're the best hotel in the world. But they're going to look at it before they look at the next smaller, the next smaller, the next smaller, the next smaller, and then they compare all that data to understand whether or not that's truly a statement, position, or phrasing or word that is validated and you're authenticated with using. So those are all important, but the fact of having your organic in place, it's step one in a process. Step two goes into the ad campaigns and the awareness that you have to pay to accelerate your ability to be presented in front of people that you may not organically get the opportunity to, because frankly, in spite of your best optimization, somebody has more relevancy, more authentication, more of content than you do and can. Best example to give you that is TripAdvisor as one. If you ever notice, and when you look at a search engine results and you look for your own business, hotel, restaurant, whatever, you'll find that there are a lot of players above you organically. Now, organically isn't the highest thing on the page anymore. Used to be that was the result, and the page was off to the side, little boxes and so forth. That world has changed. Now there is a large quantity of Google who is still trying to facilitate the information you're looking for because you're using them. They have things like answer boxes. We've talked about that on another show. They have their paid platform. If they have their hotel finder program, they have lots of stuff to hopefully help you before you ever get to the other stuff, which is first paid, then organic. But even just looking at your organic listings, you find that even though you're looking for your particular business, there are people above you organically that are representing your business better and first in that sense than you are. And I'll say better with an asterisk beside it, because really why they're there is they have more relevancy about your business than you do about yourself. TripAdvisor being an example, they not only have all the NAP information and all the other information that they can glean from you that you've actually provided online for yourself, but they have other people's information that they've aggregated as well. And then they have their own information on top of that, which is the reviews and guides and information. So Google says, wow, this page for this property is actually more valuable to what you might be looking for this property than the property's website itself, because there's more about it and more diversity and more authentication to it than the actual website of the hotel. And unfortunately, we do that to ourselves a lot of times by not providing enough information to our website. We think it's just another thing we're doing, that it's, well, it's there and it has my basic information and it has some nice little pictures of us and so forth. They don't see it as the value tool that it truly is. Brands have diminished it to that point for controlling reasons. They don't want their hotels to have independent hotels or websites, because the diversity that it creates for all the hotels is a problem for them. It may not represent their brand well. So they said, nope, we represent all of our hotels and we standardize that to a one mothership mentality. Here's the mothership, Marriott.com, Hilton.com, whatever. And then if you're going to look for one of our hotels, it's a branch within that website. It's placed within our website. There's authentication value to that. There's positives, don't get me wrong. But in my mind, lots of negatives, because what happens is the uniqueness of my hotel goes away. They don't provide the diversity of content options. They call some modules. They have a module that says, okay, this is your meetings planner module. You put all your information about meeting planners in there. And of course, they say they're going to optimize selling meetings via that page, and yes, there's a value of authentication with the major website, but you're not competing well with, say, an independent hotel that does better and has more flexibility about all the things they can do about their meeting options that you can't, because you're only told to fill in this square, this square, this square, this square. and add this picture, this picture, this picture, this picture, and that's it. They have to standardize their modules for everybody in their system. And one size does not fit all, as we often make a point. It doesn't mean that the hotel in California that has this amazing vista view of the Pacific Coast Highway should in any way be as limited as a mom and pop, not a mom and pop, but a roadside brand of the same type between point A and point C in Montana. Not taking anything away from Montana, but the differences of the uniqueness get lost in the standardization of its presentation. And that's the fallback of what SEO has when it comes to that centralization that the brands have created for our hotels. So we've had social discussions before and so forth. We've had other shows about that. We're not going to dwell into that angle too much, but just know that SEO has its limitations with your brand relationships. It has standardization and conformity. Don't get me wrong. It's like, okay, if I fill in all these squares and check all these boxes and put this right content in, it's out of my hands and it's off somewhere, which to owners is a great thing. Great. I don't have to hire somebody to do that. That's what I pay brand to do. It's done. What they don't realize is they're not doing themselves too many big favors by having that simplicity in their life either. Going back to the real value of SEO. So as a hotel, making sure my content on my website has a direct relevancy to what I am, how I am. I need to optimize all the tools that are being presented to me. We mentioned schema as being a key element to that. The next is making sure that Google My Business is fully used. It has taken on a very strong role this past 18 months, almost 2 years, in a different way than it was prior to it. And that was with the pandemic, a lot of the information necessary, and that information being who are you, what do you do, what are your hours of operation, how busy are you busy, do you deliver, do you allow pickups, um, uh, where do I go to buy things, so forth and so on. Google My Business was really well platformed, well developed to handle those things. Google My Business, in my simplistic way, is a new version of what the Yellow Pages used to be. I'm looking for something based on a very big criteria, which is location. I want the hardware store in my town. I don't want to know the hardware store in Oregon. Why is this important? Going back to the SEO discussion, if by way of phrasing my question, the Oregon hardware store was incredibly optimized for the widget that I was looking for. They were really the greatest store to buy this widget that I was looking for. It would show up in my results in earlier search engines, not so much now because it is a factor of the results that are given to me. But back in the day, if it was really optimized to be the store to buy this widget anywhere in the world because they really truly dedicated their content towards their widget knowledge and everything else, then as I'm looking in Florida for this widget store or a store that handles this widget, the Oregon store would just as likely show up as a store nearby me. Google recognized that and they made Google My Business. And they expanded what Google My Business does so that when I'm searching, and this was the mobile application process in play, when I'm searching, one of the largest criteria about the algorithm associated with my search is where I'm at when I'm searching for it. It's different than if I'm searching based on what I decide when I'm looking in area for. Case in point, hardware store that has a widget. Right now, if I look at it on my phone or on my computer and it has a proper, and I'm not using a VPN, it's going to say, "Oh, you're in this location, so let me show you the hardware stores on a map that have said they had this widget, and it's going to show this for me in my nearby proximity. It's not going to show me the Oregon widget store. It's going to show a hardware store. It's going to show me those widget stores, hardware stores in my area that has it." Taking place reverse, where can I buy the widget in Oregon? Ooh, now it's not going to show me my local stores. It's going to show me the stores in Oregon, this hardware store included, that has this widget. Well, what's other than the obvious, what's the difference? The difference might be I'm flying to Oregon or going to Oregon, and when I'm there, I need to get the widget. So defining that context within my search parameters, and that's all the terms why I'm throwing it in there, allows you to identify how you want to get shown up. Let's take it into the industry. There's difference between hotels nearby, hotels near me, which are terms that have grown exponentially, okay, than it is hotel in. So if I'm going to Indianapolis, hotel in Indianapolis is a criteria of my search. Hotels nearby, and I'm not in Indianapolis, will not give me the same results. I know it sounds obvious, but what we unfortunately do as an industry is we don't understand what we get optimized for. A lot of marketing agencies, not familiar with the industry, will do standardized optimization. And what do I mean by that is they go in and say, ah, let's identify who you are, where you are, what you are. Let's identify what you have, what you do, what they need to do to find out to buy you. It's very checkboxy. It's like, hey, we did this, we did this, we did this. The issue and the problem with this, it isn't sensitive to the way that people want to discover your business, your hotel or your restaurant, and that is about proximity and or amenities and or relationship to locales and or your reviews. These are sensitivities to the type of industry we are, and those have to have an equal weight in the optimization of your content. And a lot of that comes from, and we've mentioned this many times on the live show before, about actually asking your guests what it is that they find about you interesting, or what they find desirable, or what they thought would be of why they discovered you. Asking what your things are that people appreciate you about. Oh, I love the larger than normal rooms. I know you're, you know, the hotels in an XYZ location, but I love the larger rooms because when we travel, we're traveling here to rent an RV to go into the woods, and we have all this stuff with us. And the couple of days it takes for us to come into the town and get the RV rented and then have to load the RV. We have all this extra room that we can put all your stuff in, compared to the competitor that you're against that has smaller rooms, and we don't have the space to bring all our junk in. It's really weird, the little things that users, your guests, find different about you. And the key element to this, and this goes to something that's happening in our culture right now, is asking our audiences questions, good questions, and then using that information to better make sure that we show up for those kind of things. Now, I say what's currently in our system. Let me bring you back to a small storyline. Apple, back since I'm talking about history and being old, when they first introduced the iPhone 3, um, they laughed at it. Everybody laughed at it. What this? This is a brick. They made jokes. They showed people taping duct tape around their head with a brick on their ear because it's this square glass thing. Phones up to there and that were still going were they were the Motorola Razr, flipped open, was small. It looked like Star Trek. It curved around your face because it went to the ear and then came to the mouth and so forth. And hey, it's a phone. It's right here. Boom. What's the big deal with this glass thing? I need bigger glass and I can't even feel the buttons. How do I know I'm hitting a button? Oh, the list went on and on and on. And it really wasn't doing well for the first 5-7 months. It really was like, okay, Apple's trying to make a phone. Yay. Apple had iPods. That's what Apple did. Apple killed Walkmans, for those old enough, which were cassette players. Hey, I can carry my music around. This is amazing. And they just had rolled out not too long earlier before the phone, the iPod, which had the screen on. You can actually watch movies. A little 2-inch screen. You're watching movies, and I kid you not, we did that. And you loaded huge files down to watch movies if you could even find them. That was another thing. So anyway, then Apple opened up the Apple Store. And what it did was it allowed other people outside of themselves to say, what would you want on this thing? Next thing you know, there's weather apps and all these other apps, and the list has gone on. And millions of apps now, but at the time it was only thousands. But what it did do was provide value to a product that didn't exist on other products. And so all of a sudden, this was cool. This flat glass thing, I could look at a map or I could look at the weather. My Roto Razor that didn't do that. It was a phone, and it didn't do it. And then, of course, then it did text. Well, okay, but the text had 18 characters across the top, or 12 actually, and then another. And it's hard to read, and you had to. And now it wasn't working for what it did compared to what this piece of glass did. What's the parable of the story? Allowing the feedback of your guests to interpret the content that you need to develop for your website is critical, because really what you're doing is reflecting the interest in you. You may think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. The reality of it is what you think about yourself is only a fraction of what people see you as. It does in life as well, I guess. But now look at how we're looking at storylines and what we see in TVs. For anybody that is a Avengers fan or a DC Comics fan or Star Trek fan or Star Wars fan or any geekies in the world, okay, you had storylines. This was Spider-Man. This was Spider-Man's story. And this was Star Wars story. And this was the trilogy. And this was Star Trek. And this is what Star Trek was. This is the timeline of Star Trek. And all of this was about how do they fit it into the canon, the storyline that is accepted as the storylines that these movies and these shows run under. And then all of a sudden they twisted out going, why don't we do a show about what if? Or why don't we take one of the characters, Loki, and say there's a whole different way of looking at this as being just one version of what could be various versions. And now what you have is all these shows out there now that are a reflection of what if. Let's keep canon as canon. That's this storyline here. But now let's think about it as if this was a variable, this was a different storyline. The world opened up to all these different choices of changing things, of saying, wow, we could do things that are not violating the canon, the storyline that we've all agreed is the storyline over here, but we can create a whole bunch of variations to it without people getting mad at us. They might not like it, but they don't get mad at us. Same too with our content. And what do I mean by that? Is we have to create variables in scenarios for what we are. A lot of what we do in our SEO work is about saying, wow, this is my research. This is what I found. This is what I believe the phrasing, the discovery, the value. This is my content. This is my lobby. This is my rooms. These are my pool. This is my pool. These are my people. This is my location. These are facts. How you look at those facts is a matter of how you interpret the content that you share about them. We've seen so many times, and there's been websites many times over that have shown that dispelled what we presented ourselves as versus the reality. I remember Oyster, where we had these beautiful vista pool views with an empty, serene beach with a sunset, and the reality was it was so packed you couldn't even see the beach, and your pool was in a little box with a half wall on it that they miraculously took out of the photo, and it wasn't anything that you thought it was. And there's a big building next to it when there was no building in the picture. Okay, those things did happen. They still do happen, but we also do it in our content as well. We project content that isn't necessarily the factual content. And but here's the problem with it. It may be used once by somebody, or we may show up once because of it, because it's not being disputed for the fact that there's no um, lack of verification on it. But once it does get discovered, it has the reverse effect of in an amplification point of view. One bad thing gets amplified to 10 perspectives, and 10 turns into 100, and 100 turns into 1,000, because it gets shared in mediums and spaces that we don't get a part of. We don't even know that's happening to us. All of a sudden it gets shared in what's called dark social, where direct messages and so forth, that people are like, this place is not what they say it is. It's a dump, or it's this, or they say they're all well organized about their breakfast, but it's a freaking cold breakfast in a cardboard box. Whatever it is, it gets shared. We see a fraction of it when we see reviews and content shared on consumer sentiment pages like TripAdvisor and so forth. Expedia has their own, everybody else has their own, but we don't see the iceberg underneath of it, of all the stuff that wasn't available to be seen by us. So we have to be very proactive in how we see people's reaction to our content as a means of modifying our content to be reflecting, first off, accuracy and truth. Secondly, relevancy and interest. If you can follow that guideline, it's a very powerful guideline. To give you some tool by tool function to this, um, I'll share a diagram in the show notes. I'm not quite yet with the show where I want to start doing show and tells with bullet points and things like this. I think that takes away from what we've always done the show as, which has been open dialogue and general discussion. And for those that do listen to us more than watch us, beginning to share screens and so forth takes away from their interest and probably their wanting to listen to us. But pretty much imagine a flow chart as to a progression of discovery. It's always hard for people to say, okay, that's great, Lauren. This is great. SEO is important. Content relevancy, reflection of people's interest, and how they find us and what they find valuable to us and so forth. Where do I start? It's like writer's block. Where do I start? What's the premise of what I'm writing? The idea, first and foremost, is to identify your users. Who is interested in what you are selling to? What's the purpose of your business? In the sense of, why is your hotel where it's at? Why is your restaurant where it is, selling what it sells? What types of food and what have you? What is that? Clarity has to be written down. It has to be written. First, longhand, everything about it that you think it is, just as cluttery and as disjuncted as possible, but write it down. From that, create a sales pitch. That's doing in proper progression. A sales pitch. What would you say about you that is your most important aspects to the people that you think are going to be your users? What's the biggest things? Your quality of food, your prime location, your your room selection type, your proximity to something, whatever it is. What's your sales pitch? Okay. Now, differently, what's your mission statement? What is it about your business to provide the best accommodations near the XYZ or with the YMC, whatever? What is your mission statement? It's not your sales pitch, it's your mission statement. Why are we here? What's our purpose for being here? Not what we have to offer for being here. Why are we here? Boom. So now we have three things: general overall, what we are, our sales pitch, our mission statement. Who is the thing next? Who is interested in what we just did? Families that, and don't get very specific about a particular type of person at a particular time of year. That's persona marketing. We've talked about that. This is in general, what is the value of what you are? Because we're in the ABC town, we're right next downtown. We have the Lollapalooza festival. We have a great barbecue restaurant. Whatever it is, who's interested in it? Well, families with kids love us because we're next to such and such. Or business travelers, as much as we don't have them at the levels we used to, they will be there. They will travel. They'll have a different context to it. We've had that conversation in another show. But identify the users. Great. So now we have four pieces: general information about ourselves, sales pitch of ourselves, mission statement of ourselves, and general, our users, the people that will find us, about what we are said about ourselves above it, who would want us. Great. What do we want to tell them? We want to tell them where we are. We want to tell them what we have. We want to tell them what we offer. We want to tell them how good we are. Whatever it is, you're writing literally down that. What's what do we want to tell these people? We've decided what we are. We decide what's our best aspects of ourselves. We decide who's most interested in that. What do we want to tell them? Now begins SEO. At this stage, you're talking about now, what words did we use? And you research those. There's tons of tools to do this. Moz has great tools. Um, I have tools I've listed in the podcast. Please listen to my podcast. I review tools every week, and we do have hit SEO tools numerous times. So I'm not going to bore you with trying to recite the stuff that's already in the podcast. They're already listed in the podcast. You look at the topics of the podcast, you'll see those things. You see the tools. They're all in there. We have as many podcasts as we do live shows. Actually, we have more podcasts. We've been doing it for 17 years. So we have more podcasts, but we always keep relevant with the tools. So there are tons of tools to help you in this discovery of words that the users would do based on the ideas of what you wanted to tell them. This is the foundation. The foundation past your basic NAP information. Remember, first and foremost, top of the chain, top of the interest, top of the priority is whatever you do online for yourself in organic content is be crystal clear on things related to your NAP, name, address, phone number, information. Be succinct. This is my phone number. This is my fax number. This is my direct line. This is my email. This is my address. And amplify as much of that content as you can. This is how many rooms I have. This is I have a pool. That goes into the schema world. Actual factual is your biggest content value first proposition. What we're talking about is beyond that, the content relevant to the reasons why the users you've defined are interested in the value that you're offering. See that progression? That's a workflow. That's all that is a workflow. So we've written everything about ourselves, defined our sales pitch of what we think is our best, created a mission statement of what our purpose is, defined who would be interested in what we have to offer, and then discussed what it is that we need to tell them about what we are. Now we're looking at the words that they would use, researching the value of those words related to us. We look up these words on these tools that says, hey, this is a word, hotel in XYZ town, whatever. And those tools are very robust these days. They'll start showing you clusterings, words associated with them, where literally there's best hotel, best hotels, best hotel in, best hotels in. There's variations on variations on variations. They create variations of the words that you say, well, nobody would be using that. You'd be surprised. Misspelling, for instance, the misspelling of Marriott with one T instead of two was actually for a while higher volume traffic than the real website. No kidding. Okay. So misspells and variations of asking the same question or making the same statement are critical components in your optimization strategy. But you cluster these. So you have keyword research that creates keyword clustering. Okay. And these keywords, again, are back to what you want to convey as content to the users you think are interested in what you think of yourself and what you offer. See the progression? That's the workflow. Okay. So this keyword clustering begins to then give you bases of, okay, so I have this clustering of where am I versus what am I? Okay. This creates what's called content briefs. Content briefs are taking a cluster of words and creating content to satisfy the clustering. And yes, you start in the same progression you've always done with your NAP information. What's the most important information? If they're asking about where I am or my relevancy about where I am, being downtown and or near the stadium and or outside or out in the woods or wherever it is, or we find that to be interesting based on the topics that our users are interested in us about, then we define content generation from that content brief. So we create these keywords that we think users are using for the information we want to convey to them, what we want to say to them. We create words that we think we need to use or that they would use to discover us. We then create clusters of those keywords associated that are familiar to each other or similar in what they're trying to identify. That creates us to create content briefs for each of those. And I'm not trying to accelerate the conversation, but there's a process that you go through to prioritize those. These ones are the most important. These ones are the second most important. These ones are the least important, whatever it is. And that's the progression of priority of how you write content about them. That's your content generation. Here's a cluster of keywords associated with location that creates a content brief that says, how do we create content to answer all the things about our location, next to, nearby, adjacent to, whatever it is. We create now content to satisfy that content brief. We create several content pieces against those content briefs and then grade them. This is most important. This is next important. We even force rank them, which, for those unfamiliar with the term, you literally take a consensus of what is the number one for everyone's mind. Everyone votes. What's the number two? Everyone's mind. Everyone votes. Number three, everyone. And you can use data to do this. Don't get me wrong. You look at traffic volume, usage, relevancy. These tools help a lot with giving you information to help you decide, is this the most interesting, most important, or is it the least interesting? And even though you think it's important, the traffic is so low, it's not worth the effort. The tools will help you with this. And that creates your content grade at that point. Okay, so now we have graded. We've created a list of what we want to say in answer to what we think our users are most interested to knowing about us based on what we think we are of ourselves. There's the flow again. Okay, that brings us now with the content grade. So we have these content things written to answer our content briefs related to our keyword clustering that was generated from our keyword discovery based on the topics that we think we need to do to answer or communicate with our users that are interested most in what we are based on what we think we are from our mission statement, sales mission, a sales brief, and our general description of ourselves. This is now where we begin to see how it fits into our web formatting. Where do we put the content related to our location? How do we do it? Do we feature it within our context of general information, specific information? Then we see, how do we place it into our social conversation, our advertising programs? So it's the core basis of what we do in relationship to all the other components that we have to offer. That's our progression of SEO. So, oh, by the way, Alexis, thank you for hanging around on the one chat over this side, and thank you. Well, too many names. Sorry. On the other side, I was like, I can say hi to everybody over there, guys. But this is our progression of SEO. So hopefully, in the world of our hospitality SEO, you realize how definitive answering the topics that of communication to answer the users that we find most useful of our product is a key element on how we define our content. So just going to any agency and them creating optimization for us is really, they're going to approach it from the way they do any business, which is your NAP information followed by factual information, but it doesn't resonate with how the users would want to discover you. Your proximity to a ski slope may not be a relevancy that they discover because they're not looking for it. They're looking for all the things that are tangible, which is square footage or address or something. So knowing that you have to tailor it to your particular product is very key element in how you develop your content that resonates with your guests. And guess what? This cycle never ends. Because as soon as you're producing and introducing this into your site and pushing it forward, you're looking for the impact, the metrics associated with the engagement, the length of time that they spend on the pages, the number of pages they go into, the amount of content that they review, the pictures that they look at, the pages that they use within your website. And you look at that as to why did they abandon this side? Why did they abandon this? How long did they stay on this? And you're constantly refining that content. Plus, as I've always been a proponent of, always survey people. Ask them, did you find what you're looking for? If not, what was it? It's probably the most simplest questions to ask, but it's sometimes the most relevant questions to ask. So we're at our hour. Thank you so much. I know we started a couple of minutes late from technical issues with the internet, but it was a full hour of dedication to SEO for hotels and hospitality in general, really, restaurants included and everything else. Hopefully you found it useful to create a mental progression in how you approach SEO, which is with the core element to basically all the other fundamental things that you do, your advertising campaigns, social campaigns, how you present yourself and market in lots of ways. It is the base element, first step, as it were, in your progression of people being able to find and discover you. So remember, you can find us pretty much everywhere. If you're not already watching us on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, am I missing one? Twitter. You can, of course, or on our TV channel, actually, which you can find on Roku, Apple TV, Google TV, and Amazon Prime. We're also on Twitch, which is on your play boxes at home, where you can do Xbox or PlayStation if you want to watch us on that as well. We will re-simulcast the show as always Wednesdays 11:30 a.m. Eastern Sydney, or AM time Sydney, Australia, and also 11:30 a.m. London time as well. If you have any questions or feedback from today's show or any of the shows, please reach out to me at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. I answer each and every one of them, also with my podcast as well, which I will be making shortly after the show, which will have a brief recap of what we discussed about this past hour. But you can listen to me on pretty much anything from iTunes, Google, Stitcher, all of them. We're on 39 platforms and counting. You can even ask Alexa, Amazon, Alexa, Siri, and Google Play just to play the Hospitality Marketing Podcast, and it'll play the latest episode. So you can catch us on that. And the reason why we refer to it on today's show is because we talk about tools much more so on the podcast than we do on the live show. And I mean tools as in actual platforms and tools that I use on how and where I'd use things like keyword discovery and or SEO optimization and or content development. We've discussed several tools on all of those. So you're more than welcome to go and look at any of our previous casts. The podcast runs about 20 to 30 minutes. We don't do as near as long as we do the live show or had ever done the live show. It's much more concise when it comes to that. So thank you very much for the privilege of your time, as always. And we look forward to talking to everyone next week at 11:30 a.m. Eastern for show number 323. And I do promise you, it won't be only me that talks in time. Right now, it's just a progression of transition from our old formatting of the show to the new formatting. I've taken the task of making sure that we keep within an hour single topic to create a pattern. And then our new host, our original co-host, will begin to come back and be featured hosts that will run their shows with their co-host selections that they have. That's our new progression to that. So we hope you join us for all of those shows in the upcoming. Hope you are safe and healthy and well, and we'll talk to everyone next week. Joined us. It was great to see Tim. I haven't seen him in a while. It's great to have him pop back in. Always a pleasure to have both of you. Since we're on everything, let's be very quick about Dell. Since it's right up in vein of what we just talked about, where people can find you and what did you do, real quick?
Join me for the Hospitality Reputation Marketing Podcast, where I interview GMs and hotel owners and other amazing